This is Dateline News and Conversation. The show tonight is a continuation of a show that I did last week with an investigative journalist, Lucy Komisar. We were talking about an expose that she did on the Academy winning documentary about Navalny. Tonight, we're going to focus on the poisoning story. Lucy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, so um, I expressed my disgust really with the documentary, and I still will not watch it. The fact that it won was obviously uh, a political move,
Hmm.
propaganda for sure, and we talked about that. But tonight, um, I want to go deeper into this poisoning story. So let's pick it up there with the poisoning story.
Yeah,
Where did it begin?
that because that's really the heart of the film. And by the way, when you talk about propaganda, we know that the U.S. and the U.K. have together mounted the Russiagate disinformation, and this film also won a BAFTA in London, which is their Oscars. So the intelligence agencies obviously coordinated this. Now, the poisoning story, because it's the heart of the film. On October 20th, 2020, Navalny was winding up a campaign in southeastern Siberia. He got on the flight from Tomsk to Moscow and fell ill. On the pilot's decision, the aircraft made an unscheduled landing in Omsk, and Navalny was taken to a city hospital. The emergency ward staff treated his symptoms and stabilized his condition. A medical evacuation aircraft arrived from Germany the next day after Navalny's wife, Yulia, received Kremlin permission for his treatment in Germany. And he was flown from Omsk to Berlin on August 22 with his wife accompanying him on the flight. Now, the Western press immediately said poisoning, but there were other explanations for the illness. He had a history of medical conditions that were known to reflect sudden reduction in blood sugar and cholinesterase levels, diabetes, and allergy leading to anaphylactic shock. That information had been reported in Russia and by Navalny sources well before the Tomsk incident, but was not made public. According to IntelliNews, a business website published in Berlin, quote, Navalny himself said that he suffered from diabetes in 2019. Now, the claims that Russian intelligence agents had poisoned Navalny was invented by Bellingcat, which is a US, UK, EU governments funded organization which writes articles that support the lines of those governments' targeted adversaries. And it was picked up by CNN, and that became the essence of the film.
All right, so there's more that you discovered that expose the hoax. And one of the things I found of extreme interest was the great phone call hoax. Tell me about that.
Well, this is the smoking gun to which everything in the film is leading. It's the great telephone call hoax. And those who made the film, whether it be the people whose names are on the film or other people, they understood the psychology of manipulating audiences, which of course this is what the intelligence agencies are very good at. Slowly, you bring them into a secret scam that's going to be played on the bad guys. In this one, it starts with Navalny putting on a body mic. Why? He's not going somewhere to record someone who he doesn't want to see is recording him. Only his own team is in the room. And the real recording microphones are off camera, where the film audience can't see it. But the body mic that he puts on and comments on is a dramatist stage trick. And my article links to the actual clip. Navalny says to the camera, "Now I'm totally feel like I'm an undercover agent with the wired up." Does the audience know they're the butt of a theatrical joke? So who does he call? First, he allegedly calls 3 FSB Secret Service agents. And I need to point out, It's said that this call is made December 14th. That's almost 3 months after he fell ill and was taken to Berlin. But he, at this point, is still in Berlin. He says to each of them, "I am Navalny. Why do you want to kill me?" And the fake people hang up. The voices aren't real. They sound the same. They're computer generated or they're actors. And what's the point of it? To get the audience in on the game. Then there's the famous call to the security services scientist. Navalny says, this is translated, subtitles on the film, "Konstantin Borisovich, hello, my name is Ustinov Maxim Sergeyevich. I am Nikolai Platonovich's assistant." He says, "I need 10 minutes of your time. We'll probably ask you later for a report, but I am now making a report for Nikolai Platonovich. What went wrong with us in Tomsk? Why did the Navalny operation fail?" That's what he said. That is what Navalny is saying to this voice on the other side, maybe. According to Bellingcat, the real Kudryavtsev worked at the Ministry of Defense Biological Security Research Center and is a specialist in chemical and biological weapons, supposedly not stupid. Now, this talkative Konstantin says, "I would rate the job as well done. We did it in just the way we planned, the way we rehearsed it many times. But when the flight made an emergency landing, the situation changed, not in our favor. The medics on the ground acted right away. They injected him with an antidote of some sort. So it seems the dose was underestimated. Our calculations were good. We even applied extra." Now, there is evidence that such a call never took place. Let's start with this. Navalny, this was supposedly December 14th. Navalny was questioned by the Berlin Staatsanwaltschaft, which is the district attorney, on December 17th. Did he tell them about a phone call to Konstantin Kudryavtsev, which allegedly took place 3 days earlier? The office, I contacted the district attorney, and I have their answers on email, which I attached to my article on this, on the Komisar scoop. The office confirmed by email that it interrogated Navalny. When I sent a link to his claims about the December 14th call 3 days before, asked if he had told him about it, a spokesman said they could not comment further. And you could check out the emails. Now, what else suggests the film is a fake? There's a long section about how Christo Grozev, identified as working for Bellingcat, buys travel and contact data on the dark net to find names and phone numbers of Federal Security Service, FSB agents, who had been traveling on planes to Siberia in August of 2020. There's no way to verify that the charts and faces put up in the film prove what he claims and what Bellingcat says they prove. In fact, CNN reported December 14th. CNN cannot confirm with certainty that it was the unit based at Akademika Vargy Street that, they say, poisoned Navalny with Novichok the night of August 19th. CNN reports this the very day of the phone call. Then the Novichok poisoning. Yulia Navalnaya, the wife, says in the film, "After a week, I was unexpectedly called to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As the Navalny group arrived August 22, that would have been around August 29. She says, "They said, we have discovered that your husband was poisoned with an agent from the Novichok group. But it wasn't the Charité hospital lab that found this. The German government announced not 1 week, but 2 weeks later, after the group's arrival, that a laboratory of the German armed forces had identified a nerve agent from the Novichok group in blood samples collected after the patient's admission to Charité. Unlike the civilian doctors who had not found Novichok, and whose report is published by The Lancet, the British medical publication, the military lab would not release details of its tests. There was no toxicology report, no names of an expert in charge of the testing or of the interpretation of the results, no name and formula of the chemical compound of the Novichok group. The Germans refused to send any medical or toxicological evidence they claimed to substantiate the attempted homicide to Moscow prosecutors who were investigating the crime. From then on, of course, without evidence, the story became the West's Putin poisoned Navalny. Second, the story kept changing. First, the first poison was in a teacup at the airport cafe. then a water bottle in his hotel room, then underpants. In what form? Powder, aerosolized spray, gel? Was the FBI, sorry, could have been their version, the FSB counting on Navalny not to notice or feel moisture as he dressed, if it was underpants? On the plane, Navalny fell ill. The pilot diverted to Omsk, where he was transferred to a hospital. The calculated lethality of the dose should have been fatal after the symptom onset, but the first symptoms appeared only after several hours, and they remained non-lethal. So what about Kudryavtsev and the underpants? The film voice, Kudryavtsev says, when we arrived, that was in Omsk, they gave, he meant the underpants, to us. The local Omsk guys brought them with the police. Were the underpants still considered dangerous? Did any police fall ill? Did hospital workers who undressed Navalny get sick? Many people were exposed to Navalny and his deadly underpants, but no one has been reported to have fallen ill. The passengers who attended him in the plane and flew on to Moscow have not reported medical problems. There's even conflicting information about whether the underpants stayed in Omsk. Navalny's press secretary, Kira Yarmish, posted a tweet August 20, 2020, that's the date he fell ill, with the text, Julia, the wife, took Alexei's things with her. She said she did not allow them to be confiscated. However, The Guardian reported September 21st, that's a month later, that Navalny demanded that Moscow return his clothes. At any rate, the Charité hospital said it did not test the water bottles or the clothing. Then there's the matter of the phone call date. This poisoning took place August 20th. The phone call was December 14th. Ronald Thomas West, who identifies as a U.S. Special Forces veteran working in Europe, writes, the poisoning happened on 20 August. The hoax call is made on 14 December and released by Bellingcat on 21 December. Now, wait a minute, he says. The context of the call, a desperate demand for answers of what went wrong, Navalny didn't die, for a report to a higher-up authority, is something you would expect within the first 48 hours, not nearly 3 months later. By the time this call was made, that dust should have settled, been vacuumed up by Russia's intelligence services. Everyone would have been debriefed, including the target of the hoax call. The film is scripted to be so fast-moving, sweeping viewers into the thrill, not giving them a chance to consider how illogical and contradictory, how fake it is on the face of it.
Well, my head is spinning around this. I think, like so many of these fake stories and spins, they really designed also to confuse the viewers. I mean, I certainly am a little bit confused, but I follow precisely what you're talking about. I have one question, this underpants story. What do they really have to do with his underpants? I mean, what were they looking for?
Well, supposedly the poison was put on his underpants. I mean, that's the third story they came out with. First, it was a poison tea at the airport. Then it was water bottles at his hotel, which were taken to Berlin, but none of this was ever tested. It was only the blood was tested. And then it became the underpants. He had poisoned underpants. And that's why Kudryavtsev was sent, actually, according to the Bellingcat on CNN, 5 days after the plane was diverted, he was sent. Now, what? You wait this terrible gone wrong poisoning, and you wait 5 days to send somebody to investigate? That's when they said he showed up 5 days later. And then, there's no proof of anything. You don't know. Did anybody ever look at the underpants? First, the press agent says, Yulia took everything. And then a month later, there is demand by Navalny, return my underpants. So we don't even know where the underpants are, what happened to them. But that was never followed up. It was a story. It was the reason to make the hoax call, but it was never anything that was tested or shown to be a carrier of Novichok. They never did it. But people watching the film don't know that. They just see it's all about poisoned underpants. And did anybody test the underpants? Well, That's not brought up because actually they never did. But it moves so fast. I mean, there are parts where
Yeah.
so sweet. They go to visit a pony farm and they pet a pony, and there's the daughter, and isn't she charming? But it's all this stuff to it's to get your emotions flowing at a very fast clip. So you don't have time to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why would somebody who is involved in this secret operation get a call from somebody almost 3 months later and be told, we must make a report on this? Wait a minute. If this is a real person and this really happened, the report would have been almost 3 months earlier. That person would have known that this was a joke, a hoax. He's not a dummy, right? He's a scientist. But the film is so slick. It's done. I mean, there are masters of psychology at places in Langley. It is so slick that the people watching it are just caught up. In fact, the review in the New York Times, in the headline, it called it a thriller. That's what it was. It was a thriller, and it should have been put in under the feature films as fiction, because it's fiction. But that's how it works. But it's very, very clever, and it's done by people who are masters in psychological disinformation.
Yeah. And the one thing that I really focused on was the report from the hospital in Germany, found nothing, and then the German military hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that, when I read that, when I heard you say that, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. And they didn't come out with any facts whatsoever. So to me, that alone told me that this whole thing was rigged, the whole poisoning thing, and then of course the film. All right, now I want to move on because that's not the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
You had a face-to-face meeting, viewing of this film with the filmmakers.
Yeah.
This was really exciting to me. I would have loved to have been there. So what happened?
Well, as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, which I've been for more than 25 years, I was invited to a November 9th, 2022 Navalny screening by CNN at Hudson Yards in Manhattan. In the talkback, I asked a question. And when I go to public events and I think I'm going to ask a question, I want to record the answer, I recorded everything in the talkback. It was a public event. I asked a question. I said, my name is Lucy Komisar, and I'm an investigative journalist. I want to delve more into the Kudryavtsev story. Mr. Navalny was questioned by the prosecutor in Berlin on December 17th, and 3 days earlier was the phone call with Kudryavtsev. Did he tell the prosecutor about the phone call, which I assume they would have to check the authenticity of? And what did they determine about him? He claims on the phone he examined these things on the 25th, but on the 20th, in fact, Kudryavtsev didn't give the August 25th date, Bellingcat did. And I said, and the press secretary said Alexei's things were taken by Yulia before that, and she didn't allow them to be seized. So how could they have been examined by this man when they were already taken away? And finally, the Berlin doctor said they didn't detect any poisoning in Navalny's blood, but 2 weeks later, it was the German Armed Forces Laboratory that said yes, it did. So all these things, I think, are contradictory, and I would like to know the facts of why these contradictions exist. Christo Groziev, Bellingcat, one of the listed as one of the filmmakers, replied, almost none of this was actually correct, and including the sequence of events. I mean, this was reactive, and the FSB officer on screen on the recording that I made on my phone confessing to all of that, I said, you said it's him. We don't know it's him. Groziev, well, I think the rest of the world knows, and now, okay, be nice to know who you work for, because it was a Joe McCarthy question. I went to the post-film reception and asked Rohr, who is listed as the director, filmmaker, if I could interview him. He screamed at me, no, very much at the top of his voice. Everybody turned around. It was just a restaurant and bar. And he accused me of working for the Russians. So the film, this is one more of the pillars of Russiagate propaganda. It is clear. And the purpose is to create hostility toward Russia in the American public, to support the U.S. government, economic warfare, and military proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. And whether Rohr and his collaborators actually made the film themselves, or they got help from some people in Langley, we don't know. But we know that when Rohr has spoken, he has basically attacked the Russian position on Ukraine. So we know where he's coming from. So that event and their failure, their lies, Grozev's lies, because everything I said to him was documented, they made it clear what their purpose is.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about Russiagate. That has not gone away. I read an article today. It was about Donald Trump, and they were trying to disparage Donald Trump. And they went back to saying Trump wanted to build his hotel in Moscow, and that whole thing about him with a prostitute supposedly urinating on the bed, whatever, it's back in the news. And they just won't let this go. The whole thing with Russiagate, the whole thing with the investigation with Cohen, it's all turned out to be a farce, a lie. And here we are now, again, with this film, which I agree with you. It's definitely part of this Russiagate propaganda to keep the American public hating Russia without any facts whatsoever. Hillary Clinton is really the one who started this whole thing, reporting fake stories about Donald Trump. What else can you tell us about that?
Well, it is part of Russiagate, but when you look through, it's been very well organized, and you can show every part of it is fake. The first pillar of Russiagate was December 2012. It was the Browder hoax. It was William Browder's cover-up of his complicity in the theft of $230 million from the Russian Treasury, which was based on his fake claim that the Russians had murdered his lawyer Magnitsky, who in fact was his tax evasion accountant. Even the Physicians for Human Rights in Cambridge, Massachusetts, U.S., says he died of badly treated disease, but the State Department continues to lie that he was beaten up. And by the way, the Magnitsky Act was passed in a campaign directed by former State Department official Jonathan Weiner and financed by Russian corporate criminal Mikhail Khodorkovsky. And I've written extensively about the Browder hoax. So that was end of 2012. Then the Hillary campaign, that was 2016, promoted the fake story tying Donald Trump to Russia. That has all been proved to be a hoax, a massive hoax. The fake stories that were set up, but they're still said they've been proved a hoax. That was 2016. Then in January 2017, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report. It said Russia's interference in the U.S. election, and it concluded, quote, with high confidence that the Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. president election, including hacking the email accounts of Democratic Party officials. That's been shown to be a total fake. But by the way, at the end, they actually say they have no evidence. And the evidence that shows they're lying came at the end of that same year, in December 2017. Sean Henry, the president of CrowdStrike, which examined the DNC computer, testified to the Adam Schiff committee. They don't know who, quote, exfiltrated the emails. That was not revealed for a year and a half. And even then, in December 2019, 2 years after this hearing, and 6 months after it was made public, the Washington Post reports CrowdStrike evidence that Russians are behind the hacking. It's a total lie. And in April of 2019, there was the report of the Mueller investigation, who is now not on the Russiagators' good guy list because he found no evidence of a Trump connection to Russia. Then there was the Durham investigation, shows the Hillary Clinton campaign invented stories about Trump and Russia and shopped them to the FBI, which used them to attack people who were connected to Trump. And we end with the Navalny propaganda film. So it is, it very carefully orchestrated. Each part of the Russiagate, I call them the pillars of Russiagate, which are now at least 7, shown to be fake. Every one of them shown to be fake. And yet many of them are still repeated by the Western media, particularly the American and British media repeat these lies. And particularly now with the indictment of Trump, they repeat it again, even though they have been proved to be fake.
Yeah, this whole thing of the Trump indictment is just a continuation of this whole Russiagate.
Mm-hmm. I think it's in a sense it's more than that, but it is. Russiagate plays a big role in it. The indictment is for paying off a woman that he was involved with at the time he was married. This is not the first time this has happened, that men have done this. It's even been made public, and it has nothing to do with Russia. But things will get mixed in. Russia will be included. It will be included if Russia can be included somehow in paying off Stormy Daniels. It will be done. But to me, I'm not an expert in this. But what I've read by some lawyers is it will be thrown out because it's past the statute of limitations, and that's why even the Justice Department did not want to go after it. It's only Bragg, the New York district attorney, for his own political reasons. There are always political reasons. He has gone after it, but I think he's going to lose by this because legally it goes nowhere. This is what happens. This is what shows the U.S. Disintegrating into the kind of governments that it attacks. Very often in authoritarian states, if somebody is forced out of power, the next thing that happens is that person is indicted, is put in jail. That's what the U.S. is trying to do. So it becomes those tactics are very faked on really very fake evidence. I mean, he did pay this woman off, but doesn't seem to be rising to a level of high crime. But the U.S. is disintegrating into that. And I'm sorry to say, it's a pity. It's being led by the Democrats. I mean, I used to be a Democrat. I notice other people are saying this too. What party do you belong to? Well, I once was a Democrat. Now I'm an independent. That's true for me too. The Democrats have been taken over by the corporations and the liberal warmongers. So sorry, can't be a Democrat. But that's what's happening now, and it's looking increasingly like what happens in the states that the U.S. government puts on its bad guy list.
Yeah. I just read recently where a couple of times actually, comparing the United States to a banana republic for the way it's acting and for the way it's politicizing our entire judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
It's really something else. This propaganda, go back to what you've said, it's been created by these national security experts, the CIA and others, and they've been at this for a very, very long time. They're extremely brilliant. They're manipulators. They manipulate the social environment. They manipulate everything that people consume and believe. And I think the work that you're doing as an investigative reporter can't be overemphasized and can't be shared and disseminated enough. So I want to thank you for coming on the show with not only this 2-part series on the Navalny film,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that you and I did on the Browder
Mm-hmm.
affair, who is another. You called him, I think, the greatest con man in human history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was an overstatement. So, Lucy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
You are welcome. It's a pleasure. And I would suggest another link I have discovered between Browder and Navalny is if you look at the list of the Integrity Initiative assets, and that's the Integrity Initiative. It gets its funding from the UK Foreign Office, and my sources say it's basically an MI6 operation. And they had a hack. They were the victims of a hack, and the people that hacked it put the files online where they can be copied. And they have a list of their assets in the UK, and they include one of the top of it is William Browder, and at the bottom is Vladimir Shkaratov. I think that's his name. Uh, anyway, it's all. I add this to my story on my website on the Komisar Scoop. They are both, and this is a guy who worked for Navalny's organization, so he is connected to the Integrity Initiative. He is one of their assets. I also found in an interesting video report that Maria Pevchuk, who is another person who was involved in making the film and worked for Navalny, was listed as working with Navalny's organization, is also got a job at the UK Parliament. So it looks to me that these people are connected to the UK, and I would suspect that if they're connected to the Integrity Initiative, they might be connected to MI6. I don't have evidence of that because they don't list their people. But I think that's another very worthwhile thing to look into, whether what seems obvious that this is an intelligence made film. It'd be very useful to look further into the evidence, which tends to be circumstantial at the best. But I would say that the Integrity Initiative is a good place to start, because that's where I could see a link between Browder and Navalny.